I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. We've talked about the number 3 Defiance plane quite a bit. And it's an interesting plane, and it does a good job. I wanted to show you the difference between the Defiance plane, which is a Stanley product, and a Stanley Bailey number 3. Differences in the details. The difference between what is basically a nice user plane and a possible classic plane. This is a Stanley plane, and this one is a Defiance. These two planes are made by the same company. This is a Stanley, this is a Defiance. Defiance is a lower end plane, kind of like the difference between a Lincoln and a Ford Falcon. Ford Falcon will get you to the store and back, get you to work and back, and run very well. It's just not real fancy. The Lincoln has got all the bells and whistles. It's going to last a little longer. You see a lot more old Lincolns flying around than you do old Falcons. It also has a few more adjustment options on it. It's a little more comfortable to use, but the basic plane is the same. This holds a sharp edge at a set distance and a set angle from a surface. This one does too. Big difference is this one lets you adjust the angle and the distance a little easier than this one. This one also has a little fancier attachments and more branding than this one. We can start with a locking lever. This one is a generic. It could go on any plane of this size. This locking lever is a generic. It can go on any plane of this size. It'll fit on the Stanley. It'll also fit on this made in USA, extremely inexpensive plane. It fits all of them. And if you look at the locking levers from the rest of them, they're all pretty much interchangeable. Not too many companies are going to go through the whole process of retooling everything in their shop just to make a locking lever. Stanley did that for their Stanley line, but the Defiance and whoever this was made for, this casting is almost an exact match on this side all the way through, along with a little locking lever. The only difference that you can see is this one has the Stanley name, and this one has this little pad, spring, that takes the wear of the locking lever opening and closing. There are also variations in the way the frog is mounted. The Stanley, which even though it's pretty dirty, it's never been fully restored, and the Defiance have similarities in the locking lever. This one says C115 on the casting. Can't see what that one says. It's covered up. This one just has a similar dent where you would drill it for that pin, so that this one can be made into that one, along with this one being made into that one by the addition of the plate. The frog on the Stanley and the frog on the Defiance are where the similarities end. There's a distinct difference in the mounting. Also, this one is much dirtier because it hasn't been cleaned yet. The Stanley has a brass adjustment knob for setting the depth. It's a left-hand thread, just like the Defiance, but the Defiance is steel. The main difference between the two planes is in the frog, and it's the frog mounting that shows the real details in the design between the two products. The Defiance plane only has 2 screws holding the frog in. That's it. Nothing else connects the frog to the plane body. It has 2 rails, one on either side, that actually contact these rails here. That's what keeps it in line, side to side and up and down. You loosen the 2 screws, slide the frog back and forth to set the mouth opening. Now the bottom of this frog is machined, but not very smoothly. And then they put paint over the top of it. Paint is notorious in that it collects on the edges. You can see that this edge here is thicker than the center because the paint is wearing on the outside edges. Same thing here. We have spots on the bed, the 2 rails, where the paint has come off. That makes a thin spot, and actually tends to rock the frog. The Bailey frog has 6 points of contact. Along with the 2 screws that the Defiance has, it also has 2 pads, one on either side of this center rib. They prevent the frog from sliding side to side. Even without the screws, the frog is very securely mounted. It has this pad where the base of the frog sits and is held securely by the 2 screws. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points of contact. Then Bailey also uses this adjuster. This fork slides over the sides of this screw, and the screw allows you to move the frog back and forth. That lets you set the mouth much more precisely. And as you can see, the mouth on the Bailey plane is much narrower than the mouth on the Defiance. As you can see, the mouth on the Bailey plane is much tighter than the mouth on the Defiance. And does a tighter mouth make a better plane? There's varying opinions on that. The area behind where the blade contacts the wood doesn't have a whole lot of effect on the shaving. The area in front of the mouth has an effect. You want to have that as close to the blade as practically possible when you're working on highly configured woods. Convoluted grain, curly wood. Having this front edge of the mouth press down on the wood while you're making the shaving keeps the shaving from running ahead of the blade and stops it from splitting out and keeps you from getting as much tear out. Having a close mouth is one of those things where it's your own opinion. You have to decide for yourself if it's an improvement or not. Myself, I just as soon have the mouth as close to the blade as possible. I'm not trying to make huge chips, so I don't have a problem with clearance on a number 3. This is a number 4. Having a larger mouth on a number 4, I'm much more likely to use this as a scrub plane. Also, this is a Handyman, which is a later generation of the Defiance. The Defiance was made up until about 58 when they became Handyman brand, and the Handyman brand carried forth from there. Now there's some other differences. This is an older plane. The older planes had high knobs on them, but the high knobs causes a problem. It's a lot of torque on that base, and the wood just couldn't stand the strain. Not only was it from pushing on the plane, you're really not supposed to be putting that much force on a plane. If you're pushing hard enough to break off the front edge of the knob, you're probably doing it wrong. But that's right out there at the front end of the plane. If something gets damaged, it's going to be the thing sitting out there unprotected. The tote has the blade and the lateral adjustment lever to protect it slightly, so when it drops, you're not as likely to break the tote off. But that knob, especially the taller knobs, that's hanging out there right out in the open so that it gets whacked all the time. And you end up with a knob that looks like that one. Later planes have lower knobs and larger bases on them. This is a Stanley Bailey from the 40s, and it has a ring around the base of the knob in an attempt to protect that knob from cracking. but you can see it still has damage to it. Not as much, but it still has damage. In relation to the number 3, this number 5 has a very short knob and is much stronger, larger diameter base. It's held up well. This plane was an ugly, ugly plane when I brought it home. Still has a lot of pitting on the sides, but it shined up and works quite well. This is a Warriors plane between 1942 and 1946. Has the steel adjustment knob with a plastic ring on it, and it also has a hardwood tote, not the rosewood like this earlier Bailey has. Which one do I like better? I obviously like the Bailey better. I have quite a few of them. I actually actively look for a Bailey plane. Now I have bedrocks. That 606 is a bedrock. And this 607 is a bedrock. Both very nice planes. The 607 has had a hard life. It's got a cracked frog, and it's been severely used. I think it got dropped a few times. Somebody's done a clumsy patch on the tote. This is the first plane that I actually bought. My other planes were given to me by my father and grandfather. This one I saw in an antique store and thought, wow, that's a big one. It was 10 bucks. I bought it, been happy with it ever since. That's the major differences between the Defiance plane and the Bailey plane. I prefer the Baileys, have quite a few of them. But the Defiance plane is a good plane. It does work, it does the job, it holds the blade at the proper angle and the proper depth. It's just not as easy to adjust as the Bailey. Well, I hope that gives you a little background of the difference between a Stanley Bailey and the Defiance. The Defiance is a good plane. If it's the one that you have and you can get it sharpened up and it cuts well for you, by all means use it. But if you have a choice between picking up a Defiance or a Bailey, and the Bailey's just a slight bit more, I think I'd go with a Bailey. If you have any suggestions for a new video, questions about today's video, or any of the other videos on this channel, just drop a note in the comments. You know I read them all. Thanks for watching.